the
Welcome back.
introduction.
Welcome back. We're both gonna do the introduction because this is a big episode.
It's our 100th episode. We're old.
So we're a little silly right now.
It's been a day.
Preparing for this episode has been kind of a funny thing because I think we're both just in not disbelief, but definitely a level of shock that we're here at 100 episodes in and reflecting a little bit on how far we've come as a podcast, how far we've come as a community, how our audience has grown. Yeah, just the impact of sticking with something for 100 episodes. So we just want to talk a little bit today about where we're at right now. If you're brand new here, someone told you about this podcast and you're like, well, what is it? I don't want to go back 100 episodes and listen to everything. We're going to give you a little taste of that. And if you've been listening for a long time, it'll be a fun reminder of like why we even exist. There are a bazillion podcasts in the world. And we're not just trying to add chatter to the noise. We really are here based on personal mission and commitment to each other as best friends. So yeah. So I'm Asha. And
And I'm Kashia. And together we run Meet Bridget.
yeah.
We are super silly right now, but Meet Bridget is this podcast that has been born out of like one part necessity when the pandemic started. And it's been, 90% born out of a natural progression of our growth and our learnings and what the people want and have asked us for.
Yes. I think that's been actually a
Yeah.
big we've been reflecting a lot about because we are creating a course. If you're new here, we've created a confidence course for teen girls, but we're creating a variety of courses actually. So this is just the first of a lot to come to our community in our lessons and everything. But because we're creating a course, we've been reflecting a lot about like why would we create a course? And that's out of the learnings from just doing what we're doing and coming as far as we've come. And I feel like a big personal learning that both of us have had is just the importance of listening to your people and making more of what they like. I think we're both
Yeah.
very like philosophical, theoretical thinkers, but from the beginning to where we are now we're pretty like versed in like, oh, like maybe they'll like this. And if it flops, then it's like, okay, let's try something different. And being surprised by the things that people actually want to hear and learn more of. But then also being okay when it's like, oh, that idea was like, not as impactful as this other thing that we did. So now we're mostly like an interview podcast, right?
Yeah. Just to take it back a little bit, one of the things that I think has been so stunning to me and to both of us because we just can't stop like talking about it is, we're not just 100 episodes in, but this year, I think it really hit home that we have been doing this work. We have been Meet Bridget for almost 10 years now. And that in and of itself is wild. Just to have a company that has been alive for almost 10 years, it's crazy. It's our child. It's our child before we had children. Yeah. It's our, for a lot of our longtime listeners might know the story, the start of our love story. But Asha and I didn't start out being best friends. We started out as, friends that met through other friends and through Asha's sister. I saw that she had created something. She had developed this little website on her Instagram and early on in our friendship, and it was the Bridget Foundation. And I had been looking for a source of joy and meaning and something to just, you know, create like a different pathway that wasn't just like a career. I was looking for something to really be fulfilling to my soul and to like my personal mission of helping people and doing something really meaningful and impactful. And I just wasn't sure what it was yet. And I saw that Asha had been tinkering with something and she had this beautiful website, and I reached out to her and said I would love to know more, understand more, and be involved in any way that I can. And she had just started, developing these workshop style events where she was bridging the gap. She was creating this like even playing field for teen girls that didn't have a lot of representation and didn't see themselves in a lot of different careers. She was finding ways to, bridge them to all these open-ended possibilities that like you can be whatever you see, right? If you can see it, you can be it kind of thing. And so I jumped in and I'm so glad I did because now here we are 10 years down the road, all these iterations later, all of these like prizes won and, all of the sweat equity put in and developing workshops and events and scrapping things together and learning how to work with companies and girls. I mean, it's just been a wild ride. And then the pandemic happened.
Well, I love that you actually mentioned that because A, it makes me smile because I really see that as like not just the initiation of like a wonderful period of time working together, but also like really like the birth of our friendship. And I think it's such a special friendship to me because it's been built on this sense of shared purpose and mission. But I also love that you brought up that like if I think our initial slogan was like if she can be it or if she can see it, she can be it. And we were a nonprofit then, and now we're just a company that happens to do the work of a nonprofit basically, but in a different format, I guess. But I love that idea because it's still very much the heart of what we do. So
Mhm.
the podcast and why we agreed that like, when the pandemic hit and we had to cancel basically like a year's worth of programming, partnered events and stuff, and we really had to rethink the business and whether we could even move forward. The whole point of the podcast is to create like this library of career paths that are actually relatable. I so distinctly remember and I had a really lovely upbringing and access to a world-class education, but the amount of careers that I actually felt connected to on a real level, not just like Googling them and thinking like maybe that title sounds like something cool, were quite few. And I think that to this day, especially with social media and warped perceptions, but then also like the proliferation of more different types of career paths than ever before. It's that much more important, I think, that young women feel that their core attributes and interests can be applied to a variety of different career paths, and that there are women that were just like them as teenagers that are tremendously successful now. So I love that you mentioned that kind of a original. Even from the beginning, we had a lot
The
of like little,
seed.
yeah, quippy little slogans and things, but really it's like it's the same mission that it was when it was a nonprofit, and now it's coaching company and a podcast and has just continues to evolve, but I think we've been doing that because we've tried things and then we see what works and then we do more of what works, and
Yeah.
the best part of that has been just seeing the impact on the young women, especially in, like, our workshops and coaching, but then also we've had this wonderful new fresh page of, like, hearing back from people who have listened to the podcast or who have been on the podcast and words of encouragement there, so it's just, like it's a really
It's
crazy thing to be here.
It's really humbling too, and I mean, it's fun walking down memory lane too and just kind of being in this period of time where I feel like we're kind of grown up now, right? Like we've taught ourselves how to do so much in the span of the last several years because we really have, we've had help, we've had resources, but you and I have had to put our heads together and teach ourselves how to do everything in every instance. And I think despite the evolution of Meet Bridget, you're totally right. The core mission, the values are still the same. The goal of visibility and creating impact that's lasting and that's real is very much still the same. And when I first started to lean into what you were doing, not really understanding what your mission was just yet. I'm first generation American. I think I'm like the second person in my family and extended family to even graduate college. And I'm proud of that because it's paved the path for some of my younger siblings and cousins. I'm a big sister, but like I didn't have, just like you were seeing early on with these young girls, I didn't have a lot of connection to different types of careers and different possibilities because I am the generation creating the American dream for my family. So I'm like figuring it out. And in every step of what we've done, not only has it been so rewarding to be able to pave this way for other young women, but you and I talk about this often. It's like we get to put into practice what we're teaching on a daily basis. Like we were in our 20s when we started this. We were kids. Like, I still feel like a kid sometimes, and we have our own children. For a lot of the building part of this, it really has been rewarding in this very reciprocal way where we give everything we've got to the women and the girls that we're speaking to. But I feel like I've learned so much about myself in this process. I've strengthened my own confidence, my own sense of self, my own sense of purpose, and like what I can accomplish because, it's like you talk about in our workshops that piggy bank of making the commitment and then doing the commitment and then that creating the coin that you put into your piggy bank. And it just has become this really beautiful virtue cycle for myself. And,
Yeah. I mean,
and it folds into what we do.
totally. I mean, I feel like you and I could we often this is what makes our friendship so lovely is, like, we reflect on things together, and, like, it could feel maybe a little, like, navel gazy from the outside, but I think there's a lot of, like, takeaways that we wanna offer in this too, like that like you were mentioning with that, like, that deposit thing. So that comes out of, like, our workshop, and to give someone, like, a little preview version of it, part of our workshop, it's called Define Confidence. This is our first, online coaching offering, and we work on, like we start with the definition, the etymology of the word confidence that really translates to this idea of self-trust, and, that piggy bank idea is, like, a visualization of how one might build self-trust. So really making the commitment to yourself, right? Completing the commitment. Every time you do that on a small or big scale, you're literally giving yourself these little like foundational blocks to fill up your self-confidence piggy bank. And it sounds like such a simple concept, but I feel like it's a lot harder in practice. And we've been as we've been building this thing, we've also been challenged to practice what we're preaching, and I think, like, with the even the podcast episodes, like, we're looking at, okay, 100 episodes, like, that's a lot of deposits in the little piggy bank of our own self-confidence as a podcast. I mean, even just, like, looking at the number of downloads and everything, like, those are all little, like, okay, like, plug away, keep doing what you're doing in little tiny steps. And I
Keep
don't think
showing up.
yeah, I don't think this is even a moment of just, like, celebration, we made it. It's more of just like a okay, like this is where we're at right now. And we have so much to do and so many people we still want to impact. And we're just so thrilled to have this opportunity to work with you guys and to listen to feedback and bring more of what's wanted. Past season and what we're bringing into this season was people said they really liked the interviews even more than like our old etymology episodes where we just kind of nerded out and focused on communication, which is still going to be a part of some of our coaching. But then, there was also pretty good feedback on just episodes where Kishia and I talked on a topic, which was interesting to me because it feels so much less organized and stuff. But, I guess it's real.
Yeah. No, it's definitely real. Yeah, it is wild. It's wild. And like you said, it's not just sitting here like patting ourselves on the back because if you think about it, there have been such difficult moments and
Mm.
thank goodness that you and I have sort of opposing strengths where like you start off being, you're always like so positive and like so infectiously like outgoing about everything and it really brings me out of my shell because I wouldn't necessarily call myself a true pessimist anymore, but I my mom used to call me a worrywart, and she wasn't wrong. I'm like constantly thinking about like, oh, what's the worst case scenario? And then that makes me feel better because I'm like, well, unless the worst case scenario happens, like I have all these other routes that I could go, and that's like my baseline level of thinking. So I could really get in my own way and not move forward just if I like feed into that part of my natural persona. And so it's, part of the magic of having you as a partner and part of the reason that we've been able to keep going is because in moments where like I need to pull out of that, I look to you and I think vice versa when, things start to get challenging and you get a little bit nervous or worried, like I think that's when like my strength kicks on and I'm like, nope, we've got this. We're in high gear. We can accomplish anything because we haven't quite hit that worst case scenario yet. There's no
Yes.
asteroid heading toward Earth.
There's been a lot of like case scenarios, but not like the worst case scenario. I know. I literally feel like you're like my flagpole And I'm just like a little flag waving up there, but really you're the thing that I mean, I feel so fortified by our friendship. And I think that even more than just like, oh, I'm gonna listen to like a podcast for inspiration or like a cool story, I think there's something we've so benefited from this really uniquely female friendship with one another where I really feel like both of our self-awareness has been built and expanded just from being able to have each other as a mirror or like an
Yeah.
honest source of feedback, and
Mhm.
and a source of grace too. I think that that kind of friendship I feel like has been so fulfilling for both of us and we just want to create a place where it's not like, "Oh, everybody can be friends the way we're friends." I don't
But it's
know.
not like
It's
it's
not
not
that
that
vibe,
it's
but
like a
it's a community built on that kind of
yeah, and I think
vibes.
I think we've learned to approach friendships and relationships in this, you know, way of radical honesty and transparency and self-protection at the same time, which, now this has become like a theory that we get to share with other people, but we've practiced it and like you said mirrored it off of each other where I didn't have a lot of strong female friendships growing up. Like I was more of the girl who I felt really awkward, so I had like maybe one or two very close friends. But becoming friends with you and developing this and working with other girls, part of the development of our friendship and relationship and being able to share things has allowed me to, be like, okay, well, if I can be myself around Asha and still have intrinsic value and she still, finds me this sounds like so bad, but if she still finds me worthwhile, then like that's a good indicator that like I am worthy, of self-love, of the love of my friends, that I have something to offer. And it sounds like kind of dire when you break it down into that sense, but I think a lot of young girls and other women can relate. Like, we all have moments of feeling insufficient, like in all these different areas of our lives. And I think part of what we do is learning how to reframe those thought processes and learning how to show up in practice on a daily basis because life is, really hard and challenges
Yeah.
come your way and there are these things that shake your sense of self and shake your sense of who you are in these different relationships and different roles. And by, practicing every day that like your self-worth, your self-confidence is more about developing that daily practice, that inner self-trust that like, your self-worth isn't hinging on like a conversation or a job interview or, a date or whatever,
Yeah.
then life starts to become so much more manageable and
Totally.
enjoyable.
Well, and I can't tell you how many times I'm a person that, like, goes at, like, 100 miles an hour all the time and, like, really likes to have things working out perfectly, but then sometimes, like, when one Jenga piece gets pulled and it's starting to look like the tower's a little shaky, I do panic, and, like, I go straight into that self-critique, and then
Mhm.
also thinking, I don't know where it came from, but I think a lot of people can relate to that sense of like, I sometimes feel like if I don't have everything put together the best, very best that I possibly can, then like other people are going to be disappointed or me or aren't
Mhm.
going to think it's worthwhile. And I think that Kashia time and time again has shown me that, like I'll come to her with like my big hairy rain cloud, of a moment and she's like, that's okay, and has so much grace for me as a friend and as also as a partner, and I think that that is such magic when you're trying to build something because it's inevitable that you're gonna run into hard things professionally and personally, and I find it quite hard on our existing social media platforms to really share an unfiltered, authentic portrayal of life unless you're on
Mhm.
there 24/7, which I can't imagine being because it's like, how could I live a life naturally and be sharing every moment? And some people
Yeah.
do that, and so respect it, but I would have a mental breakdown just having to have a device up in my face all the time. I just don't feel that relaxed in that sense, like, some people can. But I do feel like on the mic, like, when we're having these conversations with each other and with all these incredible, vulnerable women, I really do feel like someone could pop in and listen to an authentic version of us.
Yeah.
I feel like this is such a more natural way to be fully ourselves than like any of the other existing social media platforms. And I think that's why we've gravitated to it as an option of being online versus other things, like we are on
Mhm.
Instagram and stuff. But this just feels the conversation feels a lot more intimate and authentic.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's a generational thing too, because it seems like for my younger siblings who are all like 8, 15 years younger than me,
Yeah.
it's like so much more natural for them to film everything. And there are moments where I really envy it, like the ability to just put it out there without feeling so self-conscious. But on the other hand, there's a piece of me that really wants to protect the sanctity of like life as it's happening. And
Yeah.
I think that you relate to that too, Ash, because it's like we have young kids. And I think I felt this way even before I had kids. Like I felt this way about my relationship. Like I am not like a big PDA person because I feel like some of those things are sacred. And like by putting it out there, then it becomes everybody's. It's not just mine. And not to say it in a selfish way, but like, for example, my relationship with my husband, like I'm obsessed with Kev. Like
Mhm.
he drives me bananas and sometimes I want to strangle him. And I'm sure he feels the same way about me. And that's just normal. But the beauty and the intricacies of our relationship, like, I'm just not the type to be like, let me put this on TikTok because it's so funny. First of all, I don't anticipate when like the best situations are going to happen where like, he says something hysterical or we have an interaction where I would be like, oh, I should that deserves to be seen by the world. Like those I can't predict. So it's like I applaud people who do have that comedic timing. We just don't. But like also then like now having a son and stuff, I want to protect and preserve like those core moments without necessarily always having to feel like I'm catching it on film. Yeah, there are moments where I'm like, I look back at my childhood and I'm like, I wish you got that on a camcorder, mom, but you know, I have plenty of great
No, I mean,
memories.
it's like it's our times and there's like pros and cons
Yeah.
to everything and like everything has a trade-off, right? I think that that's probably one of the main, if not only things I took out of my economics degree, right? That it's like there's no
Yeah.
such thing as free lunch. Anything has a trade-off for something else. Any
Yeah.
choice you make has what's called an opportunity cost. So there's a cost if you choose to go to the supermarket at 2 p.m. That means that you're not doing, something else at 2
Something
p.m. You're
else.
not meeting a friend. You're not spending time with your kid. Whatever you are doing, everything you do, your time has a cost, right? So I think that there's these trade-offs to like social media and the amazing access that it gives us. Like I definitely do research and buy products that are served to me on,
Yeah.
Instagram and, the rest of the social media world, but I think I just have a hard enough time without even a device on me, just being fully present and noticing what's going on around me. I honestly think I'm a very, like, imaginative, cranial person that I've literally it's like when you're driving your car, right? Like, if you're driving a route that you've been a million times, how many times have you, like, literally landed in your parking spot and you're like, "Shit, like, how did I even get
How
here?"
did I
I was in my head, I was on the phone, I was like or, even just if it's in quiet, I can be so in my head that it's like I
Yeah.
physically am not even taking in my surroundings, so I think that, like, trying to then and I'm a person that, like, I love PDA. I love I love taking pretty pictures, I like posting pretty pictures, I like making, like, a scrapbook version of my vacations and
Mhm.
stuff, and occasionally I do like to just, like, try to hop on and post something that's a little bit, like, less filtered and funky and silly,
Yeah.
but I just think that having to have to capture every moment makes it
Mhm.
that much harder for me to even just be, like, still and take in my 5 senses around me, and be paying
Yeah.
attention to the world around me and the other people around me, and I think that, we focus on different things as we enter different decades of life, right? And I think that so far in my early 30s, that's been, like, a big thing is just, like, stillness and, like, taking in what's really going on in any moment, and, that's led to less and less kind of, like, live and wholesome or holistic,
Yeah.
like, social media posting. But I do feel like, and we've talked about this before, like, after a great interview together or a meaningful episode recorded together or recording our class together, we hop off and I feel this like high, like that feels like drugs to me. If that sounds cheesy, but like I
No,
literally
it's
feel like
energizing.
it's so energizing just to have like a real conversation. And I feel so privileged to be a interviewer because we can really just like, it's one thing to like have coffee with someone and like get to know them. But I feel like being an interview podcast, we kind of had this license to sort of ask the spicier questions.
Mhm.
And like by with someone agreeing to be in an interview with us, they're kind of signing on to that. And I just think it gets so deep so quickly. It just is
I know. There's so many so many times too, we have this problem with each other where, like, once we get going, it's really hard to, like, curb it. Like, Asha and I are constantly the ones that are like, "Okay, we're gonna go. We have to go feed our kids." And then, like, cut to 30 minutes later, we're still saying goodbye because like, something else came up. But it's
yeah.
like it's always really, really interesting and meaningful. It's not just, like, stupid gossip or fodder for gossip or anything like that. It's like we're talking about things and ideas and mindset shifts and, like, how to impact people, and so I get I, like, constantly feel like I'm on a high every time we're, like, in an interview, on a call together, and I feel that way with our guests too,
Mm,
like, we hit that like, we always preface our interviews with, like, "Okay, we're gonna run this for an hour, we're really, like, we've gotten really great on timing," but, like, every single time I have an interview, without fail, at the end, I'm like, "I need another hour with you." Like, "We need to do this again," because there's so much more. There's so many layers to, like, each of these incredible women and, like, the failures and the things that they've done and gone through and their learnings, and it's just and it's cool because I feel like we're getting to that point now where we are gonna start bringing people back to talk about, like, part B, like,
yeah.
what have you learned since the last time we talked? Like, what's going on? How have your theories changed? It's just it's really exciting, and it's great doing this with you, and it's great every single woman has had something so impactful to share.
Well, and it's been so cool. One of my favorite things has been, um, sort of like the recap conversation after we interview someone. There's
Yeah.
always a little, like, touch point of, like,
Mhm.
some people have just had a really amazing, like, I received a beautiful handwritten thank you card, thank you, Steph Clymer, recently about just a thank you for being a part of our cause and being on the podcast and, great conversation, which truly like filled my bucket more than I could
Mhm.
say. But then like we've also had guests where right after interviewing, they're like, oh, I think I was a little too vulnerable. Like I sounded silly or like I was fumbling my words or like maybe you guys can edit that. And it's always kind of like a sweet thing to hear because I feel like that's a sign that like it was a vulnerable conversation. We
Mhm.
take
Mhm.
care, obviously, not to, like, have anyone share information that would be damaging to them or put them in a compromising position. But a lot of it is just it's just, like, the good, honest especially, like, the honesty around the teenage years and, like, just this messiness,
Yeah.
that is there, but then it's like they'll say that, and, sometimes we've let them listen to a recording or they're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna wait until it comes out," and then they listen and it's like, "Oh, it was actually really good,"
Yeah.
and having that experience for an interviewee, I think is so neat too, to kinda hear that feedback where it was like they're even listening to themselves and saying like, "What I thought was stumbly and too vulnerable or too much or oversharing actually like came together as like a really beautiful thing. And I think that's important for someone to even hear their own story and reflect on it and be
Yeah.
like, damn, yeah, I've been through a lot and it's pretty impactful. And I think that does a
Yeah.
lot for self confidence too. There's so much shared on the internet that's just like just sharing for the sake of sharing and viralness and all this stuff. But it's like, I think everybody should have that experience of like hearing their own story or seeing some of their own experience and maybe seeing it through someone else's eyes.
Yeah, I think there's something so powerful about being able to sit down. And I mean, we did this early on where you and I both have individual episodes where we interview each other and we talk about, why we are who we are and what our formative teen experiences were. And it's basically like, this is who I am. This is how I got here. This is what I went through. Like the real truth of it, not just like, oh, I'm really successful because I just have a great outlook and I manifested we really actually get into the real meat of things, and we do that with our guests. And I think, like you said, there's something really powerful, really healing sometimes about being able to sit down and speak the truth of your story. And then, because it's so unscripted and real and vulnerable, every single person that gives us feedback is like, wow, I took something out of that. And that was incredible. Or I saw myself in that. Or I wish I had heard this when I was younger because it would have informed, some of the choices or self doubts that I was having at the time. And it's also crazy because, we originally catered and our core demographic has always been our teen. We really wanted to reach these girls that are, 13 to 18 that are figuring out life and, they're looking to figure out how to develop this sense of self-trust and how to see a future, whatever it looks like, see a future in all these different iterations and see all the possibilities and be curious about it. That's what we started with, but just from doing the podcast, what we found is this has reached so many more people than we could have ever anticipated. Like my sister and her, age group, they were in their, young 20s when we started. Now they're in their mid 20s. But I get so much feedback from people in her age group, from her friend group that are like, this is really powerful. Or I listened to this episode and then I did end up having a really vulnerable conversation with my employer and I got that 20% raise. Or, I had that conversation and I really felt, fortified by, some of the things that were said on your podcast or on this episode. And it's really rewarding to hear those things because I feel like, we just keep showing up and we don't ever necessarily assume that this is going to change somebody's life or that we're doing the Lord's work, even though I kind of feel like we are. But, you know, we just show up as ourselves and keep leaning into the truth of our stories and these women's stories and leaning into the fact that like failure has really informed so much success and so much goodness and in a lot of these interviews and a lot of how people's lives have really played out. So to hear that somebody listens to it and it resonates in a way that's really real is incredible because, there's a lot of noise out there, like you said, like there's a lot of, ways to kind of mindlessly scroll and watch TikTok and feel like detached from life. And, I feel like when we get together and when we get together with our interviewees and guests, it just feels like we're plugging back in.
Yeah, and I think that more than anything, I mean, it would be great if someone listened in to like one episode and they're like, I got to listen to a bunch of episodes. But I actually really hope like when someone listens to an episode, it might inspire them to like tune out for a little while and like tune out of the internet and like tune into their own lives and their connections and the authenticity of their own experience and um, just connecting even with their younger experience or with another woman or a younger girl and just kind of getting back to that one-on-one feeling of connection. I think podcasts are a fun way for people to kind of have that voyeuristic experience and feel like they're in the room. And I think that's why we actually feel comfortable doing it because both of us, I think, are more like kind of one-on-one people than like I mean, even though we've talked to big groups and stuff, it just feels like we're just having a nice conversation on the phone or over like a fire pit or whatever, and that it
Yeah.
just happens to be listened to people all over the world.
I love not having the surface level conversations too, because that's also so nice, like to sit down with somebody
Yes.
you really admire and be like, just tell me more. Tell me something real and deep and true. And
Well, and I think when you get into people's teen years, even like some people that I've known for a long time that was like, "You should come be on my podcast." We start talking about like the teen years. I'm like, I did not know this about you at all.
yeah.
No idea about this thing. And now I see you in a different light. And I think it's so cool to
Mhm.
share those experiences, and I just hope for our teenagers and for anyone going through our coaching, it helps young women feel like their lives don't need to be edited.
Yes.
That it's like, you don't need to curate your life for something else. Your story, just as it is, will add color and insight into everything you do and into everyone that you interact with. So I think that that's just really the takeaway is like, yes, follow us, do our coaching, listen to a bunch of episodes, but go out and like connect with other women. I think maybe even some people that have been listening to us for a long time might not even know, like, okay, why Bridget? People ask us this all the time. They're like, you're Asha, she's Kashia. Who is Bridget? And Bridget was really just a name that I chose for the company originally because I liked the TED Talks. And I was like, I like that TED kind of feels like a name. It's like a person. There's a persona to the business, but it feels like a person you'd go to satisfy some like, intellectual curiosity. And for Bridget, I was like, I want that to feel like your friend you go to feel fortified, be candid with, feel reciprocal with. Bridget just felt like the name. It's an Irish name that means strong woman, which is great, but it also contains the word bridge. And I always felt like part of this was like from I had a mentor while I was at UCLA, or I was assigned a mentor that was an older man, and it was really like the most bizarre connection. It was so first of all, he was much older than me. He was like assigned to me. We didn't really have anything in common, so it wasn't really like an organic mentor relationship that started. And I just remember, I think at that point I had been modeling a little bit and doing quite well in school. And he was like, we were talking about like my career, and he's like, I would leave out all of your modeling work. He's like, people will judge you. And he was like a marketing executive at a very big,
Yeah.
prominent company. And I remember looking at him, and part of me was like, okay, yeah, listen to him. He's successful. But then I look back at that and I'm like, I was paying for everything then. I was having amazing experiences I was in the rooms with the designers and the CMOs and the CFOs and like traveling and doing all these cool things. And I'm like, why would I there were just moments like that where I was like, "This mentorship game is bizarro, like, this is not
Yeah.
valuable to me." If anything, it's giving me self-doubt and self-critique and making me question these choices, like, I made the choice to be a model at the time, and, like, I don't
Mhm.
think that any part of I mean, yes, for certain jobs, you have to kind of, like, you're going into an interview, you want to kinda, like, pick the things out of your story that, like, make sense for the job, right? Like, don't
Mhm.
just be like, "Here I am, and I, like, didn't
The
shave my armpits this
transferable
morning,"
sk Yeah, the
But, like
transferable skills
transferable,
versus,
right?
like, editing out real things about yourself.
Right, or things that might actually be important to you.
Mhm.
So I think my understanding of mentorship up to that point was like, first of all, it has to be organic. It has to feel authentic. You need to feel connected to the person, but it also shouldn't be this like, oh, this guy up here or this lady up here is like up in the heavens and gonna pass down information to me, and I should be so grateful. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is not how that's a very ageist way to see the world, I think. It should be a lot more horizontal, and this visual of a bridge kept coming to me where it's like, yes, someone who maybe has more success and life experience might come to this table and want to pass on some wisdom, but in return, I think they should also be receiving insight from a younger person or from a community or a sense of meaning and fulfillment. So we just saw it as much more like leveled, horizontal, that everybody that comes here, regardless of age or experience level, can walk away with meaning and
Something,
respect.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the crazy thing too is, we're kind of right in the middle of our prime right now, and maybe I hope that's not true because I hope in
I think
10
we're
years
just in
I'm
the
saying
beginning,
yeah,
usually.
I hope in 10 years I'm saying the same thing and, looking at your skin and my skin and going, "Wow, it just looks great tonight." Um, but but it's like it's very cool because at this point we're like 10 years deep into this, right? So we're not newbies, but like we learn so much from
Yeah.
people like 10 years younger than us. And then we also get to impart all of these things that we've learned. So, like, my, again, to like bring up my sister, she's 8 years younger than me, right? Like, she knows so much more naturally about social media and trends and what people are watching and, like, you know, how things are marketed right now in a way that's really accessible to like everyone her age and younger. There are so many things that she doesn't know that we've figured out from putting in the work over the last 10 years. So, like you said, like the very cool thing about this is it truly is this, lateral bridge where like it's a constant exchange of ideas and information and creativity and tactics and like it's just super reciprocal. So I feel like you know, we have women from like all different parts of their careers, women who have been doing things for like 20, 30 years, and then women who have just been doing things for 5, 10 years or just started out or have created a small business. And at every level, like there really is something that you can pull from that. Like I truly feel like anyone in our community could like listen to anyone's story and be like, wow, I learned something that is one, brilliant, but also completely new. And I
Yes.
I feel that way every time I talk to a new person. I'm like,
I do too, and I think
yeah.
that there's also such a sense of based on just how our educational system works, we're kinda taught that our careers are pretty linear, that it's
Mhm.
like build on top of this and build on top of this and, do your elevator pitch and tell your story and build on and, like, it sometimes can work that way, but more often than not, you know, surprises happen, life happens, people have to take pauses, take breaks, pivot some way, and take an opportunity that wasn't expected, take rejection for an opportunity they wanted. And it can all still be so successful based on your outlook, and
Yeah.
based on what you choose to take away from the failures and also the successes. So I think, I mean, it's just so thrilling because we can interview a celebrity and we can turn around and interview a stay-at-home mom. We can turn around and not even that's even a comparison, but like we
Mhm.
can interview a local business owner, we can interview a CEO of a global business. And, the scale really doesn't matter because the impact of the stories are all so unique and important and valuable that I think it's just, a special way. I think this focus on the teen years is sort of like a leveler in a way because we all
Mhm.
have I have yet to meet a woman that didn't have some sense of like, "What the hell?" as a teenager, or
Mhm.
something that they were kinda going through or unsure about. So,
Yeah, and
that's
this idea that, it's really, part of the reason that we've developed this theory of like confidence being about self-trust is because what we've also found is that the most successful women have had the rockiest moments of self-doubt and, have had to do some heavy introspection or some very deep healing. And, they come across as being like what you would think the cookie cutter definition of confidence is, where you like look at these women and you're like, wow, you're just so successful. You've got everything going for you. And that's it. It's like you are the picture of confidence, right? And there's really so much more to it where confidence isn't like this thing that they just are or aren't or a costume that they wear. It's this daily practice of them learning how to trust themselves and how to maintain that self trust, even in times where their foundation is shaken, or even in times where things don't go as planned and they have to pivot. And so it allows us to reframe the narrative from saying, I am confident or I'm not confident, to I am confident because I can do these things. I can lean into these hard things. I can trudge through these waters and keep going. And I trust myself to keep going. And that's what it is. It's been a really valuable thing, I think, for both of us to just continuously be reminded of day in and day out with our guests. And then, to get to impart that and to continue building on that foundation and sharing that. It's really cool.
it is. And I mean, to bring it back kind of full circle, I mean, we're at this point where we've decided, every company at some point decides they really like, okay, how can we take this to the next level? Like, how are we going to build more areas of sustainability into the way we're doing business? Meaning, like, how are we going to monetize in a lot of ways?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of choices you can make around that. It's like, can you lean into ads, which maybe we'll do if they're aligned to our listeners or offer some kind of value. But we really just this we had this moment where like, God, we learned so much from these interviews. And you do anything. I mean, what's that? Is it 10,000 hours or something of
Hmm.
something will make you an expert in it? I don't know how many hours we have had together on like our Meet Bridget stuff so far, but we've definitely hit this point where it's like, gosh, there's little learnings and patterns that things and takeaways that we're getting from interviewing so many different women in so many different careers but there's still these common things about the teenage years that we just wanna share in another way, and that's where our courses, our online coaching, our live coaching, it's all coming out of that motivation to share some of these little things. I mean, there's so many. One could be like, I feel like a really interesting takeaway that we've had is that if there is anything that made someone like weird or different or uncomfortable often as a teenager, if that woman leaned into that thing is usually the greatest that makes for the most successful women, the most interesting women later. Just these little ideas. But,
Yeah.
you hear all these different stories, and every once in a while, it's like someone just really took that thing and ran with it. And that's an interesting learning. I feel like the courses, Kashia and I are working our butts off to really make sure we don't wanna just offer a course for the sake of making money off of someone, really. Like, the last thing I would ever want to do is take someone's money and have them walk away from a class and be like, "That was nothing." We, stay up until the wee hours in the morning, and I think that we're pouring so much into these courses and to the idea of coaching because we don't take it lightly. I want to create something that I would sign my own daughters up for. So that's where we're at now. That's how our mission is evolving. And we invite you, our listeners, to reach out to us and share how is this journey going for you? Because we've talked about, just how this has impacted us and how fortunate and just honored we feel to be kind of this conduit between the people we're interviewing, the conversations that people we're coaching. We're just kind of passing on information, but we get to absorb it you know, in the means of it, right? But we'd love to hear what is really ticking for you, maybe any areas that we haven't fulfilled, what you're looking for in this kind of category. We so value that feedback, and it's really been a catalyst for our evolution as a company. So, yeah, this is a thank you episode.
Yeah. It's so, so steeped in gratitude, just for showing up for us, for yourself, for listening to, the ravings of two mad women who are just very passionate about disseminating the things that we've learned and, choosing community over competition and, trying to just be that lifeline for anyone who needs us.
Yeah, and I think that the best thing is because we all have imposter syndrome, right? At some
Mhm.
point in our life, it's always like, well, who am I to be the one to teach a course or to host a podcast? And it can be the thing right before you just jump in and try something. And I think that the thing that we keep returning to is that we in no place there's so many things out there that are like, "I have all the 10 tools for you to jump in and make yourself confident tomorrow." We're not saying that that's the case. It's just not. But we're learning as we go, and I think that Kashia and I are both people that feel like life is full of lessons and that we're evolving people and that we're gonna be better tomorrow than we are today. And I think that that imposter syndrome, we've gotten over it by just saying that, like, if we're vulnerable enough with where we are in our journey, I think someone will at least be able to trust that. And
Yeah,
if we're working on our own self-trust and we're being vulnerable enough for other people to then trust us, I think that's a pretty decent place to come and work on, your stuff and share and just be one step
yeah,
further along tomorrow. So that's today.
yeah.
That's episode 100.
Yeah, I mean, I am exactly the person who needs to be here because I am like so many people who have listened and have shared with us. I'm the person that doesn't believe I belong in this space, and that's exactly
Same.
why I belong in this space. And
1000%.
yep, lean into the weirdness. Thank you
Yeah.
for sticking with us for 100 episodes. We'll be here for another 100 and then another
And
100
more.
and more.
You can't get
And
rid of
um
us, but you can just turn it off, but,
And we promise to keep
no,
showing up like the weirdos we are because life is freaking hard, man.
no.
Life can be really hard.
I would love to even listen to, like, our interview episodes because even when we did them, it was obviously season 1, middle of the pandemic
Mhm.
or exiting the pandemic, and, like, Kashia and I were, like, basically editing on our own, learning how to do everything were not skilled interviewers at the time. We were just like, we just got to get these stories out here and like it's going to be us because
Yep.
it's party of 2 here. And I think we just have a very different way of doing things now just from practice. But there's also been so much that has gone on in our own personal lives since then, and I think we've shared a lot of it on the podcast
Yeah.
periodically, but, we are evolving too. So if you if you're curious, go back and listen to those episodes, and you might even see how, Kishia and I have grown ourselves in our ability to articulate our thoughts or not to, and to be okay with that.
Yeah, and
Uh,
all the things in between.
yeah, totally.
All the life in between. You literally
Lots
like,
of
the
life.
last 4 years, it's like, you'll do life with us if you just sit down and listen to 100 episodes.
Yes. And go.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're new and you're like, "Where do I start?" We're glad you started here and, keep tuning in to the podcast. It's where you can expect to hear stories of women, but, hear about the periods of their lives that might not always be shared. Our favorite compliment from someone we've interviewed is that we ask questions that they've never really talked about on a podcast or maybe even ever before.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here to inspire and to bring out, and to inspire your vulnerability in other areas of life. So thank you for listening to episode 100. Thank you, Kashia, for being my best friend and
Thanks, Josh.
just such an inspiration. So yeah, go have a great day. Meet Bridget, friends and fam. Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.